Oftentimes on this channel, I think I get plagued by the notion of right, wrong, good, bad, etc. Also, this notion of purpose, especially in the context of something that's rather fantastic that we give a blind eye to because it's so ever present. It's like a fish in water. We often rarely ever ask what this is. Meaning, think of the large improbable circumstances that was necessary for atoms cobbled together, accretion disks and whatnot, in order to create somewhat of a star, where you have other planetary bodies. And before we even get to that fact, the Big Bang in and of itself, which is basically physicists saying, look, stop asking us about what happened. We don't know. Let's just call it a Big Bang. Give us this one miracle, and we'll figure this shit out later from there. And that's basically what you have. Some improbable thing that happened with a bunch of other improbable things that happen that end up with a planetary body that has the conditions just right for tissue, atoms to cobble together to create tissues, which cobble together to create larger bodily systems, to create a thing that comprehends its environment and comprehends the reality itself. That part, mind-blowing. And to even get from that part to end up where we find ourselves in a society that have certain ideas, cultural ideas, beliefs, etc., etc., etc. Those things are phenomenal. And within the context of that, of a matter that understands the fact that it is indeed matter and understands to some degree the world that's around it, that process to come up with these kind of political ideologies, it's phenomenal. I guess that's my point. We often exist in that without necessarily really digging into that. And in the context of all of these phenomenal occurrences to come up with a person, what should you do at that time? That's a difficult prospect, even though most people don't find it to be difficult. Oftentimes, what people end up doing is appropriating something and giving it value. The value is not absolute. The value is very specific to the individual and what they put it on. The fact of the matter is, the moment that you remove God from the process, everything is fair game. Everything is on the table. You're radically free. And yet you're not radically free because you're stuck and you're taught various things as you grow up to give you a certain workable point of view of the world. And those workable points of view vary. And herein lies oftentimes conflict. What one person deems as being the most important thing in the world is not the same thing that somebody else deems as being the most important thing in the world. And you have nothing for which to force that person to your point of view, other than either the blunt force of law, which may constrain their activities on an overt level, or ideology, where you have a large group of people that just agree. And in the context of that agreement, you come up with laws and ideas and everything else to wrap that stuff around. The only thing that defends those things, though, are ideology. Good, bad, anywhere in between. The only thing that defends those things are ideology, the public, the institutions that the public creates. Whether that's the defense of slavery, whether that's the defense of eliminating Native American lands, whether that's the defense, for that matter, of allowing a colored child to walk into a school with people yelling and spitting on her because they don't like the fact that she's colored and she's going to a white school. Those things are institutions. When I was playing chess, I was a monster. I was magnificent and brutal in the way I would play that game. And as I got older and my style slightly changed, I got to be more monstrous at getting a lot of pleasure out of squeezing the shit out of an opponent. Now, when I was younger, I used to be more into the flashy types. This notion of these sweeping attacks that are just elegant and magnificent in the way that you go about ripping through someone's and checkmating the person. Long, drawn out, forced moves, 10, 15 moves up. Now, even to the point of ridiculousness. Now, what I mean by that is eschewing other wins where you're like, all right, I can drag this person to the grave, and I know that person can't do anything about it. But I am going to choose this other, more magnificent pathway where I'm going to sacrifice this piece and I'm going to get up and walk out the room. And sometimes that works. Most of the time that worked. But sometimes, no, not so much. Sometimes you miss stuff. As you get older, sometimes you lose sight of the fact that the only reason you were able to do any of that and all of that greatness had everything to do with the fact that you kept doing it year after year after year. And you were good at it. You continue to do it. The moment that you stop, it is not an act of God. Meaning your skill is not given to you by God. Your skill is given to you by practice and by repetitiveness and by continuously putting yourself in the fires of one tournament after the next to ensure that you are continuing to be that good. The moment that you stop, it goes away, up in smoke. There's flashes of you, but in many respects, it goes away. This is a painful thing to realize and a painful thing to understand when reality asserts itself and you realize, oh, that hurts. What happened? Where am I? That I was reinforced just by practice. I'm trying to make the point that your society is exactly the same way. That it's reinforced. That there are things that you and all of you care about where you forced your institutions to also care about those things. And the moment that you take your eye off the ball, it goes away. And you have monsters that can prey on those things to twist them into something that they're not necessarily supposed to be. Those things are not necessarily ripped away, by the way, overnight. Those things are worn. Those things are attacked. Sometimes the people who attack those things don't necessarily come at you in the sense of fangs. Sometimes they come at you in the sense of a grin and a great accent. Other times, the people are more belligerent. Fact of the matter is, though, the people that are more belligerent are not the ones that are most problematic. It's the ones that are most the appeasers of the group. The people who would slowly eat and eat away in this kind of war of attrition where you are not necessarily paying attention, where you would vote for things that are not necessarily in the best interest of that particular institution, where it gets whittled away until finally one generation looks up and it's gone. This is not something that's done in one generation. That's the point I'm making to you. It is the policies and the laws that take place right now, the things that these guys do right now that does not necessarily seem detrimental. And maybe it's not all at once. And maybe cancer doesn't kill the patient overnight, but over time. And as generations pass, they get accustomed to it because in their generation, this is what was normal. I'm telling you this from the standpoint of the United States, and I'm giving you a fair warning. I gave you a fair warning when Boris Johnson was running in that race. I gave you a fair warning when they were talking about Brexit. I gave you a fair warning, and I was right entire way. The NHS is on the table and will be picked apart by conservatives because they now have the chance to do so, and they're going to take it. They're not going to do it in one fell swoop, but it will be a war of attrition that is going to heat up, and that is going to be whittled away in whatever trade deal the United States gets. The company in this country they're salivating. Because what they know is there's a conservative government that's willing to play ball. There's a weakened Britain because that Britain is functioning singularly against a country that is predatory capitalists that are on board to taking the NHS apart and are going to love doing so. However, and to whatever extent they can ingratiate themselves there, they will take it. And they will, over the course of time, get further and further into that process until one day you're going to look up and it's not going to be the NHS in the way that you know it anymore. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Let me ask you this. What would Vladimir Putin look like if he was born and ended up in politics in our political system? Think about what I'm asking you. What would Vladimir Putin look like in our political system? Clearly, he would have other constraints. He would have other potential ideas of the world. Even if he had a similar impetus into whatever impetus he has now, it would still be moderated or enhanced based on the system he's in and what he's allowed to do in the context of that system. Meaning, who he is would change depending upon the environment which he was operating in. What would Boris Johnson look like if he was born in America? If Boris Johnson was a conservative in America, the conservatives in the UK, he would call them pussies. That's what he would say. And he would say the things that he could get in this country and in this political system are far, far, far more than what he could get in the UK. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I'm trying to make the point to you that the conservatives in the UK salivate at what they could do if they had the ideals that were given in this country. They're not better. They're just constrained by the system to which they're in and the people and the ideologies and institutions that are in that country. They're the same hawkish, unempathetic, gross human beings that they are here in this country. And given the opportunity, they will take it and they will whittle away at the institutions that are in the UK in the same way that they did in the United States, going from the New Deal politics. Why are people talking about a New Deal? They're talking about a New Deal because the other one was whittled away. It was basically broken down and destroyed from one year after year after year after year. You get the Reagan where taxes are cut almost in half on corporations. You have these laws that are passed. You have these people who are put in institutions that could eat away at protections for workers and for labor. And that didn't take place overnight. That took place year after year, where one generation passes to the next, where they don't fully grasp what those people were fighting for in those years where they were able to win those things. Same thing is going to happen there. I am telling you, I am giving you fair warning. I was right on all of this stuff. I told you that Boris Johnson is probably going to win that race. I said the reason he was going to win that race is because Brexit is an issue, that you can't have a referendum and then you turn around and turn your back on a referendum. It completely discredits what you were fighting for. In fact, it discredits democracy itself. And in the way that Jeremy Corbyn was hobbled into this weird position of, all right, I'm going to send a bunch of people who don't really believe in Brexit to renegotiate Brexit, which the public looks at you and says, well, wait a minute, are you for it or against it? I'm just going to do this. I'm going to be an in-betweener. It comes across as dishonest. Not just dishonest, it comes across as just weak. And in coming across as weak, you have this other strong man, Boris Johnson, who is beating you over the head with this and PMQs. And he is basically saying, I am for freedom and democracy. I am Boris Johnson. I am going to stand up and fight for the referendum that you, the public, asked for. Boris Johnson wasn't for freedom and democracy at all. Boris Johnson just wanted to cut regulation to the bone. That didn't matter. You gave him that argument by betraying the referendum. And you were punished viciously for doing so. In which case, Boris gets his numbers. Boris can do whatever he wants. He's God-man at this point. And Labour, who now ends up with Keir Starmer, who basically is a weaker, less articulate version of Tony Blair, out of his time man, every bit as much as Joe Biden, who in no way can win the argument because he doesn't really have one in contrast. These guys are in trade talks with the United States. I said early on, Boris Johnson will put the NHS up for sale. It may not be in a full swoop, but whatever trade deal he makes with companies from our country, from a Donald Trump, is going to maximize their influence in your country. whether that's getting more money for drugs, whether that's getting some kind of, I don't know, our companies into some kind of health insurance companies in your country, whatever it is, they will maximize their influence in your country and your NHS. It may make the cost of the NHS higher. It may make something less efficient. It may make the interests of Tories where they can say, well, hey, we can privatize that part of the NHS to some kind of company in the United States. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's a plank out of your NHS to function in the best interests of Britain. Trump has every interest in the world to do this. The companies have every interest in the world to do this. The PACs, the companies in the United States, and the money that they dump into politicians in this country will push for that trade deal to do exactly that. A Britain that is coming out of a Brexit where you had a relationship with the European Union, and where that relationship with the European Union to some degree protected it because it was a larger force, that's gone. That's up in smoke. Your country is weakened by that Brexit, and it will be preyed upon as such. Boris Johnson knows this. Donald Trump knows this. Boris Johnson not only knows this, Boris Johnson to some degree even might agree with this, just from the standpoint of his political ideology as a conservative. This was understood when they first came out. This was understood when Corbyn put up the document saying, look, this is what they're going to do. They're going to fuck us over. And there was no defense against that because it was true. To make matters worse, Labour put up an amendment last night. And the Tories revealed their hand by voting it down. Listen to this. Labour's put forward an amendment to the trade bill which would bar any deal which undermines or restricts a comprehensive public-funded health service free at the point of delivery. The amendment would have banned any deal that undermined the ability to maintain the quality and the safety of health and care services. It would have legally guaranteed the UK's ability to control the pricing of medicines and maintain the current level of protections for patient data. But the Tories voted the amendment down, along with separate Labour bill to keep chlorinated washed chickens and other poor quality US products out of the UK. Tory ministers insisted that amendments were not needed, as they have repeatedly said that no element of the NHS would be up for grabs for a future trade deal, and standards would not be lowered. Depends on what you mean by standards, right? Depends on what you mean by lowering standards, right? The fact that you would vote that down gets it very clear that, look, we don't want to be constrained by this sort of amendment, which protects the integrity of the NHS, because they know the truth, which is the NHS is up for grabs. The NHS in any trade deal will by definition be up for grabs from the weakened position of the UK and from the position of US companies that have a lot of clout, that will be pushing Donald Trump to be that much harder in any kind of negotiation, and with a conservative government willing to play ball that may not even believe in the NHS in the first place. Do you honestly believe that the Republican Party believes in the Postal Service? Why do you think they take one action after the next to weaken and undermine the integrity of the Postal Service in comparison to the other private companies? The Postal Service is the U.S. treasure. The overwhelming majority of the American public loves the Postal Service. They didn't put forth an amendment to get rid of it in one fair swoop. No, they undermined it, one item after the next, in any way they could, in order to get to the point where the Postal Service fails to compete in the way that it needs to operate. The NHS will be picked upon in similar ways, decade after decade. This is only the beginning. Like, share, subscribe.